Welcome on in, everyone. Tonight is going to be episode one of the podcast that me and Connor had mentioned before that we've, done in the past. Um, we sat around and kind of mulled over some ideas. Obviously, we've come up with the title of Two Minds. Um, it's kind of weird how it happened too. One day, we were chilling at Cryptid's house, obviously. Or we were just kind of there, just spitballing like just some things that had hit us over the time of gaming. Like, man, I remember playing this and da 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 da. But looking back, this one didn't really hit as well. It started with um, because I was going through mentioning how I kind of disliked how Final Fantasy is like disorderly, like non-sequential games, and how they change everything up. Kind of hurt it, but at the same time also helped project it forward. And this started because of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. And then just kind of one day it just went from there because then Connor started talking about um what was it that you mentioned?
I mean, ultimately, it's just the concept of ambivalence and how we're sitting here and we can't decide whether or not we really like a thing or we're really pissed off by something. And that is what ambivalence
Yeah.
is. You can feel multiple ways about a thing simultaneously, and they can be, contradictory or, just a complete inverse mindset. And you can be of two minds, roll
Hmm.
credits, about any
But
particular topic.
yeah, yeah, because this has gone back and forth with us, not only in just gaming, but just in media altogether. Like
Yeah.
we've had our discussions with anime, with movie, with shows, hell, even comic books and stuff like that, and just like the writing in general, how we felt about this compared to this, or you know, this didn't really hit for us, and just et cetera, et cetera. Whereas sometimes you see how sometimes you see everything just get a bunch of praise, but then someone like either one of us could be like, it wasn't that good, like, or I just don't see the hype behind it. I just don't see what's so good about this. And again, me and Cryptid have had plenty of discussions on certain things where um we are usually on opposite ends of certain topics, and that's fine. And so it kind of just made sense for us to try something like this, just to express ourselves, to not I guess just to have that out in the open for everyone else to kind of see our experiences for certain things that we're not here to obviously sway anyone. We're just kind of letting our experiences with certain things that have come about in our lives that aren't always agreeable with amongst us or just in the general audience altogether. um so yeah, that's kind of where the idea came from.
All of that to say, uh, we're a bunch of old timey kind of storytellers, and we will sit and pontificate about any particular idea or thought for so much longer than that idea will often deserve. So we're here to do that and include all y'all and make a bigger conversation about it. Because at the end of the day, this is the stuff we talk about on air and off air. So
Hmm.
generating a bigger
Oh,
conversation is what we're here for.
yeah, and also too, when we're talking, feel free to chime in if you guys feel indifferent about what we say, or if you agree with us. We will read what's going on. We may not always acknowledge what's going on because obviously we're just kind of trying to keep it within ourselves, but we still do encourage you guys to participate with us because we do want to keep you guys active as well. Because again, you guys may enlighten us on something that maybe we didn't actually think of, or maybe something we may have missed on certain topics or certain subjects that we discuss. Um, that being said, tonight's discussion um, will be one that's, I know, that hits close to home for both me and Cryptid. Um, it's on turn-based games. With the recent, obviously, praise that Clair Obscure Expedition 33 has gotten, I had mentioned it to Cryptid that this is a damn fine game. um, so,
It's a common parlance, man. It's just what we do.
but, but the thing was is that I've seen so many media outlets talk about this game like this is the sudden revival of turn-based games, as if they had been dead all these years, and that kind of struck a chord with me. Definitely struck a chord with Cryptid, as because I mean, honestly, he plays more turn-based games and RPGs than I do, and it really stuck with us. That is like, well, that's not true. Like, how can you like say that this is a revival to the genre when the past 3, 4, 5 years there have been plenty of turn-based RPGs that have been prevalent in the gaming space, that I feel it's unfair to say that, oh, this game particularly is the definitive revival when that's not entirely true.
To
Like, I
quote the
mean, we've played.
Necronomicon, as you do, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and in strange aeons even death may die. Now, the fucking core of that is that turn-based games were never gone, they were never dead, and it's really like two or three kind of posts that got traction on Twitter that really just brought around the idea of like, okay, man, Expedition 33 is really great, really good. No one's contesting
Yeah.
that here. I still haven't played it, just because time is ethereal and out of my hands.
Yes, we have our busy schedules.
But I have been looking forward to it since the original launch trailer. Like it's been on my to-do list. Uh, but
Actually, we've been actually looking forward to it since we saw it last year at Summer Games Fest.
yeah,
We both saw that trailer and we're just like, that we need that now.
I mean, it was definitely intriguing. It was mostly a kind of cinematic feeler reel.
Yeah, it was a show. It was a showcase, obviously.
Vibe was good, and game comes out, and game is really good, and game is made by a small indie team, and that indie team is full of people who are sick of the like ins and outs of the AAA games industry, and they came together and made something that is, being like a serious contender for game of the year.
Yeah.
It is
Actually, fun fact. Speaking of what you just mentioned, I found out today actually only 3 members of the team were actually Ubisoft pro devs. The rest of the people they found were like all junior devs or people who had no experience in the development space. Like, that just blows my mind. That actively blows my mind how they were able to get their resources together to put something like so beautiful together.
Yeah. We'll have the trailer playing behind us. And
Yeah.
I'm just gonna mute that because I don't want to deal with copyright today.
Of course.
But yeah, no, just like this beautiful ethereal game that also just happened to be a turn-based RPG, just is immensely successful from the first drop, and a lot of people are going out of their way to try to attribute this to like, oh well, this is what launching off of Game Pass will do. This is what the benefit of having small teams is like. Oh hey, you just run with this idea. Like they're doing so in like a kind of diminutive way. This game earned all of its praise. It's awesome. It's sold like, what was it, over 500,000, 1 million units, something. I was reading
It's
a
at
headline earlier.
it's currently at over 2 million.
It's over 2.
Currently.
Okay, so
Over 2 million currently.
and it's it's not even a traditional turn-based RPG. It kind of fits the model that Super Mario RPG did, where there are interactive aspects of it with both dodging and active time parries, and so it's not like your classic Final Fantasy 1 click button do thing, enemy turn, click button do thing.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Oh, even on
it is an
the attack.
exemplar of the genre right now.
Yeah, even in the attack portion, there is still like a little quick time event to, if you get it on a certain point, it does some damage. But if you get the perfect quick time press of it, you get the most damage out of it.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of engagement on the attacking and defensive aspect of the gameplay.
But yeah, I mean, this idea that turn-based games are, back, or they're making a return,
Yeah,
or anything is a complete. Uh, it,
I
it
wouldn't say mockery, but
no, it's just
it,
over.
it,
It's an
it, it
overstatement,
it's it,
man. It's
yeah,
just
it's a disservice to the genre itself, as if like
like if we look even
they've
to
been
last
dead
year and
for years.
technically the year before, like we have like tens to hundreds of turn-based games, RPGs, JRPGs,
Hmm.
and there's a couple that come to mind. I know that you had one. Uh, let's bring the list up. Um, so Clair Obscure, really great, thumbs up, recommend it, 100%. But the fact that the matter is that it is not this exemplar of a return because turn-based games never left.
Yes, and it's not to say again like it's just funny because from what I've heard from just what I've seen, people think this is so genre defining. Like it's blown turn-based games into like a new direction. I'm like, no, it's just a really good turn-based game. It's got a great gameplay mechanic in terms of battles. It's got an excellent story so far. I'm only about halfway through, and I am so invested in these characters. And even from the get-go, it hits you with some raw emotions. Like you're about to get yourself into some shit because right off the get-go, they hit you in the emotions where they're like, yeah, this may or may not end well for. Um, it graphically looks so beautiful in Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah.
This small dev team did work. And I mean they did work with making these environments look so lush, so beautiful. Even the darkest drab ones, you still feel like holy crap, like it still pulls a certain emotion out of you like God, like there's like no life here, but you still have to make the trek through this area to get to the next checkpoint. This cityscape here at the beginning, the prologue area, it literally felt like an entire lively city, but a lively city that knew doom was about to come because of this gomage that happens, which is where you see everyone become the flower petals. So everyone's like having this celebration because it's their last moments of life for whoever's left in this case whoever's 33 and older gets ripped out, they just get snapped out of existence, and so everyone that's left there is just kind of having to remember them for who they were, celebrate who they were, and then boom, you make the expedition on over. So then you're just like, holy crap, like right out the get-go you're just like, no, yeah, we have to stop this paintress if she's doing this. So it's so captivating, and these areas that you visit, it feels like each area is its own world. Like you get so engrossed, like especially meeting the NPC like characters. Like there's these, um, I guess tribal people you meet called the Gestrels. All they care about is fighting. That's all they care about. Their one thing is they love to fight, and that's it. That they love to solve everything by fighting. I'm just like, holy cow! But they love making jokes about it. Is another thing. Like it's like, oh, you're looking at me. You better not rob. There's one instance where you visit a house in their village, and the guy's sleeping, and he's like, you better not have just woken me up because you're gonna rob me. And so he stands up and he moves out of the doorway, and you go in, you rob him, and he's like, I knew it. And then it triggers a fight with one of the random NPCs. And I'm like, that's so awesome. Like, those are little things and little moments that you're just like, yeah, they make the world feel alive. Um,
So I don't have the same degree of investment in the actual like narrative of the story because I haven't started playing it yet. But functionally, I can from the outset, you can tell that
mm,
the key points on like what is great about Expedition 33 is that it is a unique intellectual property. It is a new title. It is a
yes.
new game. It is not. It is not derivative of any one particular thing. It is bringing a really strong narrative that with a well-written world setting, strong interpersonal narratives, and like just looking from the trailer, an amazing degree of world and creature design. And it's
Yes.
again made by a small team. There's no you do not get that sense of like, oh hey, here's an idea that was presented initially and then had to be compromised for the sake of either expediting release or appealing to a broader mass. No, this is a game that exists and is successful because it is a unique thing and it is allowed to be itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Could you imagine like these guys had a job over at Ubisoft and they left because they're like, we're bored. We're not doing anything here.
Yeah,
We
I think it
want
was
to we
a
want to have
quote
our
from the
own
director, right?
it's a straight up quote from the director that said he left Ubisoft because he was bored and he wanted to make a game of his own without all the, political contention of like getting things approved. No, he just said, I want to make this game and I'm gonna do it. And don't even get me started on the music. The music to this game, dude, if you even just listen to the OST on Spotify or anything, it magical. It's
Yeah,
one of my favorite OSTs
I
so far.
think
Like I listen to that on repeat.
the end point of that quote is saying that if they had tried to make this game the way that they did, if they had to deal with the internal politics of the development studio they were originally working for, the game wouldn't be made within 25 years. And that might be
Yeah.
just like a overzealous, uh, overestimation for the sake of making that point. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like, no, this game would not exist as it is were it not
If they would
released
have
in the under the circumstances that it did.
Yeah, in the terms of like the traditional big business where they have to go through approvals and they have to pass it through this committee and through this and then it has to get a certain amount of votes for it to even go into pre-production, not even pre-production, just
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 production,
writing
initial
the
production,
production.
any kind of approval for anything. I mean, writing by committee is the death of creativity. It's how you get
Yeah.
games like what was that thing that came out on PS5 where the original trailer looked really great and then it came out and the writing was so terrible that everyone just vomited all over the floor? Forsaken. It
Oh
was
yeah, the
like
Square Enix game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Forsaken.
just like the initial gameplay trailer and like world setting trailer looked really cool, and then you look to this like really low, like D tier Joss Whedon esque fucking banter dialogue, and it just completely destroyed any kind of momentum that game had.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, Expedition 33 did remind me of another game that came out not too long ago that was just. It hit a lot of those same points. I'll just minimize that for a second. Just
It
a
was
moment, y'all.
just last year, wasn't it?
1, 2 years ago, roughly a year and a half. That would be the Thaumaturge, which is also a turn-based. Uh, it is somewhat similar to Clair Obscur.
Expedition 33.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but it's a slightly more realistic approach. It has, it's not breaking any molds when it comes to graphical fidelity, but it looks good. It's also a small team, but it's a Eastern European style, like very Slavic coded game that plays into like folklore
Hmm.
and it's essentially like it's not too far off of a persona like that's the thing that comes to mind because you're basically chaining these ghosts to be how you fight off other supernatural happenings, and your role as the thaumaturge is to kind of do what you would
Oh.
expect a like an exorcist to do. Again, creature design's really good, original concept.
Yeah, I was about to say this creature right here that's on screen on the trailer that
Yeah, this is
looks
a
impressive.
enemy that you invoke into your service.
Oh.
I only got like a good 2/3 of the way into the game. I've been wanting to come back with it and play it on stream. Um,
Yeah, I
but
can kind of see how you make the comparison to Expedition. Even some of the like visually, like the style of like the clothing and the setting looks pretty damn close to Expedition 33.
yeah, where people compare Expedition 33 to JRPGs in that it's like a French JRPG, like a JRPG, J apostrophe RPG. This would be like J with an umlaut. I don't know if
Oh
that's a
Jesus
thing, but
Christ!
this is no, this is very, very Slavic.
No,
It
it's
takes
like
place during
it's like J and then silent letters in between RPG.
yeah, like 14 different
Yeah,
anyway,
vowels and
um
consonants.
it's a really interesting game, and it didn't get a lot of, the press that a lot of what you saw with Expedition 33, but like the gameplay is just as solid.
Yeah,
You're dealing with like a really heavily social focused like kind of interaction system where you need to channel your spirits and level up your character in a particular way to appeal to people in a different style or setting. There's different character builds depending on how you want to push a particular situation. Like you can go more socially focused and like gain powers that can help you influence conversations to go a particular way, or you can just make your murder ghosts really murder ghosty. It's awesome. The
yes,
game
do
could
that.
definitely run a little better, but the core narrative is super on point. And it's one
Yeah,
that I would like 100% recommend. I'm planning on streaming this at some point. But yeah, no, it reminded
yeah,
me when people were having this conversation about the return to turn-based RPGs. It's like, man, this is one that
right.
immediately came out. This is
Yeah,
and it's not too dissimilar in art style to
yeah.
Expedition
Oh,
33, and this game
absolutely.
didn't get any of the love that game did.
Yeah, and then
Um,
that's a such a like it's sad to see that because you're like these games are great and they deserve praise, but it's just because people just tend to sleep on the genre because as we've heard it before, people are like turn-based is dead, they're boring games. A lot of these games get passed up because of that. And it's just like these games have just as compelling stories and the same thing is on par of like what AAA games do with their visuals, their music, their gameplay, their characters.
I
'Cause,
mean,
yeah,
if
this game graphically
anything,
looks
when you look at
very well.
what we would call like a double A indie game,
Mm, mm, mm.
something that
Yeah.
has comparably high graphical fidelity, but ultimately is made by a small team, or has a smaller budget, or any number
Yeah,
of things.
that's what I was gonna say. What does define double A? Is it because of graphically how it looks, or budget wise
I think it's just
because of what it
budget,
is?
honestly. I think the difference between calling something an indie game and calling something like a double A game, double A is just like kind of a
Reminds me
pompous
of
title.
baseball.
It, it's
Yeah.
uh, it's like if this game were made by a major studio, we would call it triple A because it would take 10 times the budget to get this thing to look the way it does with a larger studio.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, what we consider triple A, or what the industry considers triple A, is just really the only defining factor is bloated budgets. That's it. It's like, oh hey,
Okay.
did
Yeah,
it
yeah, makes
cost
sense.
$500 million for you to put out the last Call of Duty game? Yeah, that's a AAA game. Did
Yeah.
this indie darling take like $6 million to make over the course of like however many years? Yeah, but also it's just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
There's more
Yeah,
like
no, that's true.
narrative merit in this game than I would say the last 10 major like big studio first person shooters that have come out in the last 5 years. Um,
True. You're all right about that.
but yeah, I mean, I think it comes with a falling attention span that people don't like dealing, or like the idea that people don't like dealing with turn-based games. It just comes with this generic idea of like who your core audience is, like who the core audience of gamers is in the long term.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to have the same install base that fucking FIFA or Call of Duty have? No, obviously not. When you look at turn-based games, they really kind of focus into a particular niche. It's either a deep set groove by long-running series or franchises, or it's trying to cut a new piece of the pie out of people who are like starved for narrative.
Yeah.
And that's where games like this come in.
Now, this may sound like a hot take, but I feel when it comes to games like this, for instance, for like turn-based RPGs or RPGs in general, I feel that audience is more willing to open up and expand their repertoire of games, whether it's AAA to AA to indie, over fans of gaming. Like, I mean, for instance, like for sports games or shooters, for instance, Call of Duty fans. I feel like for them, Call of Duty is the maximum, and there's no other shooter
Well,
game out there.
I feel like this
Like it
kind
would not
of
be.
this
It
blends
would like
into the
not be.
conversation that we've had about hero shooters being the new hotness. Or a couple years ago, people were all trying to jump onto the battle royale scene, and everyone
Yeah,
failed because you can't beat Fortnite and the fact that they have licensing agreements with every
that
major
is
media
true.
franchise on the planet.
It is true.
It's just pursuing the lowest common denominator because that's going to give them the highest output, and it's also lower effort. If you don't have to workshop the writing in the media property you're putting out, then you can focus more on like exploitative gambling mechanics in your loot boxes and what's going to make you
Yeah,
the most millions of dollars at the end of the day. It doesn't matter whether or not there's any kind of merit or value in the product itself. It doesn't matter if it's making a definitive stance or statement on something, or even fucking telling a story at all, as long as, you're making all of your exploitation money back.
yeah, that's fair. But yeah, Thaumaturge does look interesting. I've personally again never played it. I've only seen you like start it up, but it does look interesting though. Like I feel like it'd be something I would like to give a try, just to get the experience out of it.
I mean, for anyone who does appreciate like this era in history and time frame, like literally you walk into a village and then solve a ghost problem and basically make a deal with the devil with literally Rasputin.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Um,
Who wouldn't?
like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that, and like it gives that old Grimm's fairy tales level of darkness in the creature design
Mm,
and how they appear and how they affect the world around them. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean that's the other half of it is like every time the further into a particular niche you go, the less output you're going to get from it. Um, unless you just make something that is so immensely novel that it captures people's interest regardless of what they care for. Like there's a whole bunch of people who like the whole core of the opinion that turn-based RPGs are back is that there's a huge part of the demographic that just doesn't play turn-based RPGs because they're not willing to put 140 hours in to clear, Persona 5 or fucking Metaphor ReFantazio,
yeah.
because that's what a typical
Or
full playthrough costs time wise.
yeah, that's true. I mean, not all RPGs, obviously, or not all turn-based RPGs are that long, but
Yeah,
some of the bigger ones, on average, yes, they do tend to be like 60 plus hours, and
it's a time
that's if you
investment,
just want to beat the base
and
game. Yeah, that's also
time
the other
is
thing. It's
money.
like, do you want to put in time? Yeah. So, but yeah, and then again, this was an impressive game for a small studio. An indie was here. Moving forward, my next choice of it's actually another indie game as well. Um, would be Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars was a RPG, a turn-based RPG that was such a callback to the Super Nintendo era for me. Because there's so much in this game that just reminded me of that era of gaming when I first started experiencing turn-based RPGs. For instance, like Chrono Trigger, you had Final Fantasy VI, Illusions of Gaia, Secret of Mana. This game has something that sparked that like childhood me again. Like when I was experiencing those games for the first time ever, this game gave me that exact sensation as I did back then. Graphically, obviously, yes, literally, it's not gonna be the prettiest, but it's not supposed to be. It's stuck in that, what is it, the 16-bit, 32-bit era of gaming
You know, I
during.
refute the idea that this is not like a 16-bit game cannot be as beautiful or more artistically valuable
Oh yeah,
than a Unreal Engine hyper realistic
of
art
course.
style.
And I'm yeah, of course, I'm not trying to degrade the art style, but I'm just saying like graphically, it's not going to be something that people are going to look at and be like, "Wow, this is pushing the limits." It's like, no, this is a nod to that era of gaming.
Yeah.
So for instance, like starting it up, like just you start off as these little kids, as most of these RPGs, in some random village where they later find they're actually like gifted heroes, and now they have to make this journey. But what I really loved about it, to again going back to the gameplay, is that it gave me a mix of Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana more than anything, because you roll around with this party, obviously, um, and I
This
love the
was
combo
also on
attacks that you can do.
the two playlists, so gameplay wise, it's a little closer to Chrono
Yes.
Trigger, where it's a little like it's a hybrid ATB system.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But at the same time, though, it still has this combination attack mechanic where it's like your attacks you can bounce off of one of your party members to make the attack stronger, or certain attacks if you time them correctly, because there's certain attacks that you do have to time. They bounce between the enemies. So I forget what the character's name is, but he throws like almost like a shuriken type weapon, and it can bounce between enemies if you time it correctly, back and forth, back and forth. And then with the most recent update too, why I said it reminded me of Secret of Mana as well, is that in the most recent update they added co-op. So
Okay.
you with a DLC, with you and a friend can actually experience it all together, just like Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is like, oh yeah, you can each play your own character, control them, and it just gave me that like childhood sensation when I first got to experience, the Super Nintendo and my first real experience of RPGs. That's what this game hit for me. But and all that aside, it just is an amazing game to play. The story is fantastic, and I would highly recommend it to anyone. Like all the games we're gonna talk about, for the most part, except for the ones that we're gonna actually not badmouth, but have a disagreement with.
We might.
I
Yeah.
would always highly recommend. I would highly recommend everyone just to try. Let's see, like for instance, right there, that attack where it was bouncing off the enemies, like so you could fire the shuriken, hit an enemy. When it comes back to you, if you time it correctly, it bounces off to another enemy, so on and so forth. And the cool thing is that can go on for quite some time, except it gets faster every time it comes back to you. So your reaction time has to be a lot quicker. But just looking at the game itself,
So
I was
again,
so blown
integrating
away.
skill into what otherwise would be just click a button to do a thing style
Exactly.
of gameplay.
Exactly. And then there are like break mechanics too, where it's like, oh, certain attacks you have to do to break an enemy's guard. And it's just like these are things you really have to think about, because you're not just gonna brute force your way through this. I feel like sometimes that's a misconception where people are like, oh, you just click attack and that's it. Like you're just gonna get through it. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of thought in like a process of how you want to approach certain enemies. This game does push that limit where it's like certain enemies can only be broke by a certain attack, and you have to have a certain amount of AP points, or essentially mana points, to do said attacks, because then they end up being combo attacks. And again, this game just floored me from the get go, because immediately when I saw it, the first thing that went through my head, I was just like, "This is Chrono Trigger."
I
But
mean,
like new
it's an
age Chrono
evolution of
Trigger.
Chrono Trigger. It's like what your brain remembers Chrono Trigger being, as opposed to what Chrono Trigger actually was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so immediately I was so drawn to this. And even when I like just first fired it up, I was playing it, and I was like, my God, I was so invested from the get go that I didn't want to put the game down. And for me, that usually is that to me is what matters most. Is like if you can keep me that engaged, where I'm like, I can't stop thinking about the game. I need to keep playing. I want to see what happens next. That for me, I'm just like, that is a game. That is a winner, regardless of whatever else may happen or what people think. But for me personally, those are the type of games that I've always, and this is why I've been so drawn to turn-based RPGs, because the stories are usually so engaging. They make you fall in love with certain characters. Maybe not all of them, but you'll end up being attached to a group of characters or one character, and you're like, I have to see their story out. I have to see what happens to this person in the end.
Well, I mean that
So
that
yeah,
is
that's why.
kind of the point of utilizing turn-based RPGs as a format, is that you're less so worried about, your the fidelity of your gameplay or the concept of multiplayer as a whole, so that you can use the art and whatever writing uh, you want to focus on
Yeah,
to create a story and create a unique enough story that it doesn't necessarily matter that the gameplay is simpler or doesn't have the same degree of technological complexity, or is pushing whatever boundary, because ultimately it is serving as a platform for a story to be told.
mm, hmm. And then I don't know if you saw right there. Actually, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. The composer to this game was the composer of Chrono
Yeah, they
Trigger and
straight up did
Xenogears.
get Mitsuda, right?
Yeah,
So
which again, both of those games mean so much to me because I played both of them all the way through. Played them all throughout my childhood. So just hearing that music again also brings back that familiarity to that era of me in that time frame of gaming where I'm like, yeah, this feels familiar to me, and it's a great sensation to have.
well, I feel like if anything, the concept of the spiritual successor is in and of itself proof that a particular genre not like has merit and should still be around, because it is focusing on the fact that people want something so badly and they are not receiving that, they're not fulfilling that want, or the
Yeah,
industry is not fulfilling that want, so they go out of their way to create that thing for themselves because the industry has failed to do so. I mean, that's the call to action of being a creative. It's the reason that I went back to school to improve, my base writing skills, because ultimately there's stories that I keep looking for that I can't find anywhere else. So ultimately it becomes my responsibility to make those stories happen. And that's the
of
same thing
course.
for people who are bringing back the subgenres or styles of gameplay that are just not being fulfilled by the industry, because we're just subject to this communal gaslighting because it doesn't serve, the shareholders' interest to put effort into making what, like, the products that you're making.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a fair evaluation of that.
yeah. Let me. I don't know why that's
Well,
happening. Uh, but yeah, no. So
actually, did you ever play Sea of Stars?
I played the first 2 hours of it, and I
Okay.
failed to get back to it.
Gotcha. No, I was gonna say, I was like, I don't know, because that was another game I know we had talked about, but I never knew if you actually went to play it or
I
attempted to
wanted to,
play
and I
it.
watched a couple streams of the game later on, but I haven't played through the second half or finished it myself.
Also, I know something we haven't mentioned in the few games. Can I just tell you how much I love overworld traversal in RPGs? I absolutely love the way you like travel in X33 and Sea of Stars, and then most of the games that today or we're going to discuss today. I love when you go out into the world and they make it feel like there's a world. Like you see this full on map and you're like, oh, there's that location.
Yeah.
It lets you travel around and you get to explore the
So this
overworld.
is like one of my favorite terms that I constantly use, and it makes me sound like a pompous asshole. But this is what this is an aspect of what we would call ludonarrative resonance or ludonarrative synchronicity. It's where the gameplay and the narrative line up to reiterate each other. So when you're dealing with a lot of RPGs are going to follow your traditional hero's story,
Hmm.
and that inquires some degree of going about a journey and setting out into the world, having a rise and fall and denouement, conflict, and eventual return to home as a changed person. I'm missing a couple of points, but that's the basic hero story. Um, you
Sure.
like to be able to actually see the world pass you by and see your progress not only as a person but as a character, and the development of the world mirroring your own experience and mirroring your own development and maturity, or at least the characters. That is a huge aspect of ludonarrative resonance. And for games that don't necessarily provide that focus, you can still achieve that, but it's something that, like, the reason that we don't skip over all of the nights of camping when we're talking about the Lord of the Rings and how, oh yeah, no, you start at the Shire, you end at Mount Doom, is because that's the story, that's the point. So seeing the world shift every step you take, every random attack battle that you go through, and then seeing the world shift and change to reciprocate what the state of the overall state of the world narratively, to see that, like, to actually see that visually helps
Hmm.
reiterate what the narrative is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
It strengthens the point ultimately. But yeah, the next point on the docket is ultimately just, I mean, we're focusing a little bit on the industry. Um, there really is just this community wide gaslighting that, the want for turn based games isn't there, and I've always
Hmm.
disagreed with it. Yes, is there a huge
So
audience for
absolutely.
more action oriented games? Of course. There's,
Yeah.
again, lowest common denominator. The easier the entry point is for anything, the more people are going to like the thing. But
True.
just because, like, it's a really cynical outlook to say that, oh, we don't trust our audience to have the attention span to read through a novel's worth of dialogue and have to interact with different statuses and do the math themselves when it comes to action combat or turn-based combat, how to best effectively tackle a particular problem. Like, because it's not just hitting the attack button, it's part of the game to focus
Yeah.
on how to best optimize what you're doing. The whole
Of
reason
course.
status screens exist is so that you can make decisions to force, how your character plays one way or another. It depends on the game, obviously, but the industry doesn't trust you to do that, and there's no way for them to exploit it if we want to be really
Yeah.
cynical. Unless
And
you're looking
actually,
at the Ubisoft or Destiny style of gameplay, where it's like, oh well, we're gonna create a fake problem to sell you a solution, with
mm,
loot boxes and the micro economies.
I wanted to ask you just a quick, like, short little side note. Personally, do you prefer an RPG where the stats go up automatically on a character, or do you prefer to allocate the stats yourself?
I prefer a hybridized RPG, where you have guaranteed stat increases based off of a particular facet of the game, but then there is a degree of stat increase that is up to you. If we go back to Chrono Trigger, you don't have
Hmm.
to use all the ability tabs on Chrono, but everybody knows you're going to use every ability tab on Chrono. He's the main character. So a
He's
little
the
bit
one
like
that you
that.
know is supposed to survive.
On the flip side, I really am not a fan of the way that a certain other game that we will bring up after the fact, the way that Pokemon does it, where EV and IV values are semi-randomized depending on whether or not you focus specific combat interactions. Like,
Yeah.
you only get certain EVs from dealing with certain Pokemon in certain settings. I think that system sucks, and it leads to the competitive scene being like toxic as hell and full of people who are just genning their own perfect
Yeah.
IV, perfect EV, uh,
That's
maxed out
usually what
Pokemon.
happens.
And the people who actually put the effort in or try to just use what they got throughout their personal
Journey.
playthrough, left in the dust because they didn't spend 2,000 hours min maxing a legitimate perfect IV starter Pokemon. You know,
Yeah.
we did roll over one other thing that I want to go back to though. Um,
Yeah.
I think the best, like, we're talking about recent games that are like the exemplar of an exemplar of the genre. And I think that it's impossible to talk about turn-based games or JRPGs as not. I mean, this isn't exclusively JRPGs. It's
RPGs as a whole.
JRPGs do have a tendency to take up a large portion of the turn-based game space because that's just
Mhm.
that's the overlap. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
But I think it's impossible to talk about this without mentioning Metaphor ReFantasio. That
Of
is
course.
like that game is amazing. It has won, a whole bunch of different. It won Best Narrative at the Game Awards last year. It got snuffed for Best Soundtrack.
Yep. One best RPG. Actually, one best RPG.
Yes. But ultimately, this game is. It's usually really trite to essentially write about writing. So to
Yes.
make an RPG that is about RPG mechanics, that is a meta narrative about the greater state of what turn-based RPGs are, have been, and will evolve to be, and what you need, like how the player needs to interact with them to progress in the way that the simultaneous stagnancy and evolution of the genre has forced
Mhm.
them to kind of interact. Because, so, getting too ahead of myself, Metaphor Fantasio is the first true fantasy game made by the team at Atlas behind Persona 3, 4, and 5.
Hmm?
People will argue this is Persona 6. It is its own thing. Don't worry about it. Except there's a lot of stuff in here that maybe if you played Shin Megami Tensei 5 and Soul Hackers 1 and all of the Persona games, you would appreciate the reference to. But ultimately, every aspect of this game stands on its own. This is a game about stories. This is a game about role playing games. It takes the Persona dynamic of, standard RPG battles, except your specialized powers and abilities are determined by whatever archetype your character embodies the most. An archetype, for those who don't know, because it's a 50-cent word in a in any word challenge, is just the exemplar of an idea. So the archetypical warrior is, you look at Guts from Berserk. He is the archetypical
Yeah.
warrior, big sword,
It's
super.
essentially like the job system from like Final Fantasy,
Yeah, I mean, the job
where
system
it's like,
represents archetypes of a particular
yeah,
style of character. Like the assassin class is the archetypical assassin. You're gonna have the guy who's light leather armor, uses either throwing knives or
dagger.
shuriken or daggers or poison or whichever. So you're replacing the Persona system where in Persona the powers are representative of the facade that the Persona user maintains to face themselves and the difficulties of life. And in Metaphor, archetypes are just you exemplify this one ideal so viscerally that you're able to manifest it as like this magical force and power.
Mm.
Now that's what it is in a narrative sense. Ultimately, the characters that represent a particular archetype are that archetype. Your magician or Yusuke stand-in is the warrior. He is the standard warrior, but his actual character goes above and beyond that. Stroll as a character is much more complex than what his archetype would infer. And the further you
Stroll
go
is the guy that
along,
wears that guy,
yeah,
right?
he's
Right
that guy
there,
right
right? The
there.
one the magic. Okay.
He's the one with the horns who looks like Yu Narukami from Persona 4.
Yeah. I was like, you kind of have to forgive me because I didn't play the game. Like, I
It's all
only
good.
saw some of the demo, so
I'm
some of the
also
character
trying not
names I
to
don't
go too hard into
familiar.
spoilers. But the thing about
Fair. That's
the
fair.
archetype system is that eventually your characters have to start branching out beyond their own archetypes to become effective in battle. So there are weaknesses that your archetype will
Hmm.
have that if you put effort and experience into a different, usually opposite archetype, it will allow you to cover the balances not only from a statistical point of view with how your character builds as they level up, but also like in abilities. So I think it's like the easiest example is the main character is the Seeker, or you know the stand-in for the Fool in any Persona game.
Yeah.
They have a focus that is they have a strength in wind magic, but a weakness to electricity magic. But if you level into, I don't remember which one it is specifically, but if you level into either mage or knight or something, one of those classes gives you a passive ability that resists that weakness that you can then carry over back to your original archetype branch. So if
Oh,
you,
okay.
as a character, expand outside of the expectations of your role, you can become a stronger character. This is another huge example of Ludo
You
narrative
you
resonance.
get you
That
see
synchronicity.
the rewards, or
It's
you
the
see the growth
gameplay
of
informs the
that.
narrative because ultimately you see
Okay.
that your growth as a character, your ability to exemplify this archetype and to branch into an archetype that is not yours to make up for your own weaknesses is in and of itself proof that your character is growing both from a numbers and values set, but also narratively, you are growing as a person. You are becoming stronger. You are covering for old weaknesses. You are increasing. The protagonist increases personal stat values similar to how you would in your regular Persona games. You can only be so charming before you're able to do a particular thing. You can only be
Or
so courageous before you can go after a particular quest. But all of this is about growth, and it is both a commentary on the expectations of what turn-based RPGs are and what JRPGs are, because Atlas and the Shin Megami Tensei franchise and the team behind that series is like this is where you are getting the basic expectation for how these games will play, how turn-based games evolve usually coincides with Shin Megami Tensei games. A lot of people like Pokemon and think that that's its own system. Pokemon stole its battle system from Megami Tensei.
yeah.
The monster capturing system existed in the recruitment system essentially existed way earlier than Pokemon Red and Green or Red and
Yeah.
Blue on the American side.
Shin Megami Tensei 1 was on Nintendo before Pokemon was even an
Or
idea.
before even Shin Megami Tensei,
Yeah, Megami Tensei,
Goddess
yeah.
Reincarnation is the origin of that gameplay mechanic, and people attribute it to Pokemon so heavily that the Pokemon company is able to win lawsuits against copycats about how their gameplay
So,
mechanics are in and of themselves representative of the intellectual property.
patented game mechanics. Stupid.
It's dumb. But Metaphor is really great, and it takes. I will recommend this game 110% with a huge asterisk, being that it is a huge time investment and it can be really frustrating.
Oh,
Because at the end of the day,
absolutely.
this is an Atlas RPG, which means it's going to take 140 hours to clear your first playthrough if you care.
Yeah.
but this is like the one criticism I'll have of this game is that in a standard difficulty increase over the course of a game, you're expecting a slope. You're expecting an even line going from, your 0, 0 mark to your positive XY coordinate. You want a pretty even slope, or even like, a slope that gives you a little more time to become like a powerhouse.
It's like a
This game,
gradual increase.
yeah, this game is not a single line on a graph. This game's difficulty pacing is a staircase. You will hit a wall, and then you will have to ascend straight up before you can progress. Then you will go forward, and it will be fucking easy street until you hit the next wall. And then you will rinse repeat. And the answers to the difficulty will become more and more complex as the different systems in this game reveal themselves. And again, not going to go into specific spoilers, but the last 2 or 3 characters introduce new mechanics that completely invert how you play the game up until that point.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
it's no longer even about. I'm talking about the masked dancer and the summoner, which are 2
Hmm.
classes that are. There's like 40 something individual classes in the game that are
Yeah.
represented in archetypes that are the top or bottom of a particular branch. Those 2 classes integrate different grindable resources to unlock different accessories that accessories or passive upgrades that differentiate what you can do with the class. The masked dancer allows you to create mask accessories that are only equipable when you have that archetype active, and they just give you a different archetype's moveset, like the whole thing. Like
Pretty dope.
you can have masked dancer, and then you can make the
Uh-huh.
archetype for the magic knight, and then you have all of the moves of the magic knight, including some of the passives. But you
Yeah.
also gain elemental strengths and weaknesses depending on what you pick. So there are safer bets that have less elemental weaknesses or less common elemental weaknesses, but they
Yeah.
also usually have higher cost abilities that become more difficult to use. But yeah, I
That
mean,
almost sounds like the mimic class from like Final Fantasy.
it might
Or it's like
be
they
representing that, and the evolution of that class may or may not be called the persona user,
of course.
like literally. But I mean, there's a whole bunch of referential stuff to
Hmm.
Atlas's own properties, but I mean, the archetype system is just all of the fantasy classes all rolled into a different context, and some would say actually a stronger context, because they are in and of themselves a meta reference, and how they're used and how you can subvert certain systems within the game by like going out of your way to combine certain items or certain abilities. Like there's a couple of secret super bosses that you can just like completely nullify their entire move set for 1 or 2 characters and destroy the combat system, because much like Shin Megami Tensei, this game uses a slightly altered version of Atlas's press turn system. This is a turn-based RPG, but if you play smart, you're able to gain more turns,
Mm.
or if you trap your enemies into if you learn their move sets or learn their abilities, you can force them into making bad moves, which makes them lose turns.
Actually, speaking on that mechanic, I actually really enjoy that mechanic much more than I do in RPGs, where it's like, oh, if your stat is just faster, you go more times. I always love that mechanic from like the Shin Megami Tensei games and Persona games, that if you hit the enemy with the right elemental, or if you break their defense, you in turn get more turns and it delays but accordingly, it's also the reverse because if the enemies hit you with like that, then they get extra turns. And I've always loved that type of mechanic.
So Atlas
Where it's like
games
it
also do
grants
that
you.
thing where stats actually matter. It's not just a matter of whether or not one stat is bigger than the enemy's stat. It's straight up like buffs and debuffs actually make the difference in these
Mhm.
games, and you can actively apply statuses to boss monsters. Which good luck doing that in a Final Fantasy. Like just to give you the big secondary like biggest contemporary,
Yeah.
because the whole thing with Final Fantasy bosses is they're completely immune to half of that shit, so there's really no reason to like level into that. There's It's such a trope, it's such a meme trope that there are like meta referential anime series that are just like, well, why would I focus on status inflicting when I can just hit things hard, and then, oh, the main character is super overpowered because they can just do statuses to anybody.
Yeah. Or the one other thing I know Final Fantasy is also notorious of, they have that stupid gimmick boss where it's like, oh yeah, just hit it with a Phoenix down or an X potion, it automatically kills it because
You know what?
they're
No,
undead
I
or
will
they're
fight.
zombie.
I will fight for the zombie status. The zombie status is my favorite fucking thing because it means that if you hoard max potions, that you can just knock the
Yeah.
fucking boss out in 2 rounds.
Hmm.
I'm calling
Absolutely.
out Final Fantasy X specifically
Yeah, I
because
know which boss you're talking about.
there are a couple towards the end where it's like they either
Yeah.
have zombie inflicted or you can inflict zombie on them,
Yeah.
and
Like
then
that's like the only exception to Final Fantasy because
yeah,
other than that, most bosses are always immune to statuses. And
the
they'll have
reason
their
that Final
one
Fantasy
elemental
X is my favorite.
the one elemental weakness, if that. Unlike, like when I first played Nocturne, and we all know that first notorious boss fight against the Matador, you actively had to have someone constantly just debuffing, buffing your team,
There's a
debuffing,
9 in 10
buffing.
chance that you lose the first fight in the game. In that game, it's so
Oh,
good. I love it.
absolutely, absolutely. But that's the type of difficulty though that makes it fun to learn the way the game is intended to be played. Or I
Yeah.
shouldn't say intended, but it makes you learn to think of strategies like, well, trying to brute force this clearly isn't going to work.
Yeah,
How
so
can I
I
get
can go
around
into
this?
the systems of like what metaphor does. Metaphor
Mm,
is like what if you played Death Stranding, you would have fallen
I
into
did
the
not.
mindset of understanding Hideo Kojima's obsession with double entendres or triple entendres or septuple entendres. The game
I
is a
played all the Metal Gear
metaphor.
games.
The game is a fucking metaphor. Every aspect of the game has a narrative resonant point being made, and that includes gameplay.
Okay.
So very similar. It's something that it's hard to recommend a multi-100 hour RPG. Also, there's a real secret super boss that you have to fight in New Game Plus, and that means a minimum of 200 hour time investment. That's really hard to sell to people, but this game is
Yeah, that's true.
amazing. This game is going to
I
do
feel like
things that other things can only dream of.
I feel like sometimes that's only for the hardcore fans. Because there are times, even for me, I'm just like, I'd rather just go through and play it through. I don't have that kind of time to go through everything again to reach a certain point to fight a super boss.
Yeah,
I'd rather
it's
just
a hard sell
enjoy my first. Yeah, I mean, again, but even then,
because with this 150 hours,
that's
I could go and play
that's
a
just
different
yeah.
hyper RPG.
Because it's just like it's one of those. Is like that's just an extra if you want to, but even on your first playthrough, you can still thoroughly enjoy the game and get a full story out of it.
Yeah,
That's
I
for
mean,
sure.
ultimately,
It's not
the
like
story
it's not
is
like
the
you need to
same.
play it again
There's
to get
always
a different.
especially in Atlas RPGs, there's always reasons to go back and do their New Game Plus options whenever
Yeah.
they're present, because
Well,
there's either things that did not exist in the first version of the game, or you're just gonna steamroll everything so hard that it's gonna be really fun to go back through and do in 25 hours what took you 150 to get done.
yeah.
But time investment.
Yeah, that's always the
To
big
quote the
thing.
great Dean Kamen, the creator of the Segway, time investment is hard to sell, much like the rest of games, which is why, which, much like turn-based RPGs are difficult to sell to the same degree that live-action games as a service schlock is. I feel like the biggest part of why we think that, or quote unquote, why the greater public thinks that turn-based RPGs are dead is because we've been communally gaslit by a couple of people within the industry. My biggest sources of blame point to Keiji Inafune. Uh, guy who was made notable for the Mighty Number Nine and also being a producer on Mega Man, not a creator. Let's not mix that up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
He made this huge push in the early aughts for Western style games to be made by Japanese developers. That the Western style action games were the way of the future, and this was reciprocated by a couple of key players over in Square Enix. I mean,
Yep.
ultimately, I think it just kind of coincided with after Final Fantasy X, certain devs just did not want to make turn-based RPGs because they couldn't think of new ways to spin on it.
Yeah.
So we've just been, and ultimately, this benefited American publishers like EA and Activision because they were the
Most
biggest
notably.
proprietors of easy turnaround schlock, or the yearly release of, hey, we're going to sell you literally the same game again and not change anything, and actually legit forget to change the number in the title menu until a day one patch. Looking
Yeah.
at
Oh
you,
yeah.
FIFA 24, right?
Let's not even overlook Ubisoft as well with the yearly Assassin's Creed as well. They were
Yeah,
also guilty of that too.
super super cynical because I feel like you can tie in the death of the Assassin's Creed games narratively with that as well, because Assassin's Creed 1 and every part of Assassin's Creed 2 were all really involved in their narrative. And then Assassin's Creed 3 did a lot of work to kill that narrative, to
Woof.
make a the justification of a yearly franchise out of the thing, even though
Yeah.
you can't. And Assassin's Creed 4 just was really good gameplay wise.
True.
So people are like, "Oh, hey, maybe there's a point to this style of game still being around." But no, no.
No, it wasn't.
Every single game that's come out since then has proven that that is not the case. That 4 was a fluke.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So Ubisoft, Activision, EA, they're all benefiting from the idea that narrative games are dead and that the focus is on multiplayer because that's the easiest way to sell extra shit of uh, on top of your initial purchase.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
era of
even
DLC and all of this garbage that we're dealing with
exactly.
today.
I was about to mention, even action games would started getting guilty about selling the rest of the game as a DLC. Look at Capcom. They did that with Asura's Wrath. And then I just felt like there were certain games that were unnecessary that did they just added DLC just because it's like, well, we can sell it. It's a profit. We just add this on. That is just like, why? Like, just make a full game. You don't need to piecemeal it anymore.
So I think the most egregious part of this era is EA's acquisition of BioWare. BioWare kind of skirts the main idea that we're dealing with here with turn-based games,
Yeah.
and that's more CRPGs is their wheelhouse. But at the end of the day, it's still the dynamic shift from RPG focuses to non-RPG schlock, these hybrid action games that were coming out basically post Mass Effect 1.
Yeah.
Because you're going from the original Baldur's Gate games and Baldur's Gate 2 and the Star Wars KOTOR games, and that era just dying out when the company that owned BioWare went on. They went under in the sense that EA bought all of the rights for all of their properties out from under them.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when you see the dynamic shift is the launch of Mass Effect. And Mass Effect was super successful because it was a traditional fantasy RPG, but just in space. They flipped the SFF, the sci-fi fiction script, to push for a new narrative like they sold the idea of narrative more than anything.
Hmm.
And it coincided with another standard so I this is another big conversation that we might have later, but Dragon Age Origins came out around the same time that Mass Effect 2 did, and it became kind of the test bed for the shift towards an action RPG, that the kind of dynamic that Mass Effect was pushing. And the good CRPG parts of Dragon Age are great until you get to the bad action parts that were implemented after the fact, mostly in Dragon Age 2, as a result of Mass Effect's 2 success. And its shift towards essentially a cover shooter while still having a standard RPG narrative and selling the importance of your decisions and how things will translate from point A to point B between the games. Like, your narrative decisions will matter.
Of course.
But I blame Mass Effect for Dragon Age getting the can. But yeah, are there any industry things that you wanted to highlight? Because I can be cynical all day.
Well, I know that, of course. That's part of your Miranda. No, I mean, well, I mean, for me, again, because it's been such a series in my life, um, and it's one of my favorite of all time. For me, it was the shift of turn-based in Final Fantasy. Like,
Yeah.
personally for me, and as we've discussed before, personally for me, I felt Final Fantasy changing from turn-based to whatever it's trying to be in terms of action-based was somewhat of a mistake.
I mean, as much as we can look back with a little bit of high regard for Final Fantasy X-2 now,
Yeah, and that's
with
the one. Yeah,
context,
that's the shift that I'm talking about.
because FF10's like my favorite Final Fantasy, and I know that that's not. People will argue with me on that, and it's whatever. It's just the one that I care the most about. But it's also
fair.
like the defining line between when Final Fantasy shifted from the best version of its turn-based system to the
Yeah.
worst version of its ATB system.
Yes, absolutely.
Let me see if I can bring that up.
Like, going from Final Fantasy X, you're like, okay, this game's amazing. You love how the action works. You love how the gameplay works. You're switching party members out, things. You're like, okay, you're planning things out. Then they announce 10-2, and you're like, oh crap, the first Final Fantasy to get a sequel. And then suddenly you see the gameplay, and you're like, this isn't exactly what I was thinking it was gonna be, because you really just thought you were gonna get more of 10. Like, I honestly thought that's what it was gonna be.
You're hanging out with some of the same characters, even though some of them have changed and they're new characters, and
Yeah.
the world state is really weird.
And then you finally get in, and it's like, oh, it's active time battle. And mind you, this is before the HD remastered or remixed version. The active time battle you couldn't change in the original was active time battle. In the HD remix or the HD remasters, they went and changed
ATB
that where
with pause.
yeah, you can keep it ATB active, or you could put ATB with a pause, meaning whenever the gauges for everyone fills, the enemies stop attacking until you take your turns. But in the original release, it was, if you were trying to think about your moves on the fly and you're taking your time, the enemy's still kicking your ass. That by the time you even make a decision, you're probably already dead. And again, of course, people are going to be like, well, just get good. Just learn your attacks ahead of time. It's like, no, not everyone's going to be able to think about that. Not everyone's going to be able to adjust to that.
Like the whole point of playing a role-playing game is for you to think analytically and take into consideration all of the new aspects of what the new situation you're dealing with is.
yes.
Why would I not want to take my time? Why would I'm being put against the clock? It's that extra stress timer that really just kind of ruins.
And then from there, it's like it never went back. Because then you get an even, I wouldn't even say better version, but somewhat better version in Final Fantasy XII's gameplay. But even then, that just felt weird to play too. Because it's not like you're really controlling. Because you can honestly set that game to just auto, and the game controls itself as long as you have the right moves.
I mean, I think that,
really that.
At least the re-release of Echoes of the Zodiac Age, it does give you a more traditional Final Fantasy kind of degree of control. But it does feel like this is the first game coming out after a major MMO release, because it was FF11 was MMO, and FF12 feels like they were taking notes from the MMO. So you're dealing with a kind of hybrid system that doesn't super work.
It felt like half point and click, where it's like you take your character, then you use your little thing to look at whatever character you want to attack. Then they like walk in that path. Like it literally felt like an offline MMO where your characters could separately walk in different paths if you had them attack different enemies. That it just felt so weird to control. Like it wasn't action oriented,
honestly,
but it wasn't really fully a turn based as well, because at some point, if you don't make any decisions, they just default to just attacking. Like an MMO, they just go back into a standard attack, just slash, until you bring up the menu again to be like, okay, use this skill. And then you go to the other character, you can use this skill on this enemy. And that just felt... And then we make the jump to 13. And 13, I'm just like, that game I don't even want to get into, because... And it doesn't feel like Final Fantasy jumps into action until 15. And even then, 15 was
there's problems like with 15.
Base 15, yes. Royal Edition, I will stand by. That's the one you want to play. But even then, that didn't feel fully action oriented, because it's like you still have to decide what you're doing. It's not like you're just being able to do combos on the fly.
It's like
you still had
what
a
if
menu.
Kingdom Hearts 2's combat system wasn't as good feeling and also had other menu shit forced into it. I am still ambivalent about Final Fantasy 15 as a whole. I think going back to it, and I honestly, because I played through the original and then I tried going back through the Royal Edition with all the the content adds. And it's just like the differences are so jarring that you, like, if you go back trying to relive the original experience, you can't. And if you try to go in to experience the new content from a fresh perspective, it's just like the differences in gameplay are just so fucking jarring. Like being able to play between the different combat styles. It doesn't mesh well, is my problem.
No, it does. It's not. It does not. And let's face it, Final Fantasy didn't become a fully action-oriented game until 16, and surprised that's because they brought in the guy from DMC.
Because the ability bars are closer to your ability toolkit that you would have in Final Fantasy 14, which, shock, it's the FF14 team that made the thing.
Yeah, and then you get the guy behind DMC doing the combat.
I don't need this advertisement, thank you.
Yeah, what the hell? What is this?
I don't know,
man. So it's one of those. It's just like, I personally, I would love. I know it's never probably going to happen again, but I would love Final Fantasy to go back to being a turn-based. Which my only hopes are for that ever going to be are a Final Fantasy Tactics remake,
So that's
And
stepping
depending,
into the range of uh, things that are kind of turn-based games but are not turn-based games, because Tactics is a tactical RPG,
yeah,
which is technically different from a strategy RPG because there are strategy tactics
of course.
RPGs.
There's some turn-based aspect to tactics, but also too, I
I
was
mean,
like,
Tactics is turn-based. That's
or
not incorrect to
or
say, but
you give me this remake to Final Fantasy IX that's been going around buzzing for years now. Then I'm like, but they say they're gonna remake it, but I'm like, remake it in the aspect of how,
I
like
don't know,
remake it
man.
just
Just
like
don't
Final
have
Fantasy
someone other
VII. I
than
doubt
Tetsuya
it.
Nomura touch something and give
Oh
it to
god.
someone who cares.
But yeah, so that was like my whole thing. I felt that would be a quote unquote death of the turn based for Final Fantasies. I wouldn't say it was a death. I just feel they lost touch with what
Well,
they
no, I mean,
wanted to be
the
for
most
what they were.
legitimate death of turn-based games is within the Final Fantasy franchise because he went from FF10, which had the
Yeah.
most standard, like the most archetypical form of turn-based RPG, with your standard party system and
Yeah.
active swapping of party members, and like the turn bar in the upper side of the screen so you can plan strategically about how and who is going to attack.
Yes.
But functionally, every single game after that wanted to stray away from the turn-based standard, and they just did this weird hybridization of of the things that the series is known for, but we're changing it up because we have to change from turn-based RPGs. It's not like we have a guaranteed fan base that we could just keep making new
Yeah.
products for. It's, fucking slash s. But it's weird. It's weird that they chose to switch. I
Especially on a
understand like
sequel.
stagnation from a development standpoint. Like you can only make a
Yeah.
particular system one way or another, and you want to try to do something else that's different over a long enough period of time. And that's fine, you just don't have to make that a Final Fantasy game. Square Enix is known for all of the other spin off franchises that Final Fantasy has essentially funded. Make a different game. If you're going to make Final Fantasy as we know it. And I mean, that can also be seen as a little reductive. Hey, ambivalence, it's what we're here for. It can be seen as reductive to say that because, like, why can't Final Fantasy also be an action game? Why can't we have a better DMC in Final Fantasy 16 than in Bayonetta 3? But at the end of the day, there's expectations for what the identity of Final Fantasy is, and
Yeah.
11 onward doesn't actually kind of meet that criteria in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And
Yep.
MMOs aside, 11 and 14, they are what they're intended to be, MMOs. In terms of like mainline single player, I feel like they never quite hit that mark. They like never quite hit the mark of wanting to reach this potential of, yes, we have an action based, like a faster based gameplay mechanic rather than having our turn based. I wouldn't say even stagnant gameplay, but something that bridges that, like where it's like, oh yeah, we're moving this static gameplay to more engaging. But I felt like they never actually hit that mark because even pushing the line of this engaging gameplay still felt a little weird because like I'm not really that engaged still.
I mean, if we want to talk about stagnation in turn-based gameplay, I think the best thing to talk
Yes,
about is fucking Pokemon, because
absolutely.
it is like there what can you do with Pokemon? Pokemon has become a joke in and of itself, because
Yeah.
the Pokemon series and franchise is I guess I'll just play the ZA trailer. Never mind, it's 23 seconds. I forgot. They don't care about
That game, I
Zygarde. All right, here's the longer trailer. But yeah, Pokemon has stagnated so heavily over the last like 10 or so years. It is the most successful media franchise on the planet that is like not
Mm-hmm.
debatable in any way, shape, or form.
There's 100%.
Like the marketing machine that is Pokemon and the merchandise machine that is Pokemon is like rivaling the Bible on its worldwide notability and money creation. Uh, which is a dumb thing to say, but like you look at you can take a Pikachu and put it in front of any child in the world, and 9 out of 10 will know what the hell that is.
Yeah.
But functionally, Game Freak, who develops Pokemon, has had for a solid 15 years had the excuse to not have to evolve the standard gameplay of Pokemon because it was locked to portable hardware for the majority of the series lifespan.
Yes.
They were all they were doing basic, RPG Maker style grid based turn based RPGs, which had arguably strong creature design that got weaker as we went on. But then, you had representatives from the company saying that it was due to limitations of the hardware because they tried to push to 3D too soon, and
Yeah.
they were claiming that most of their dev time was spent in making 3D models that they didn't have experience with when we were doing the jump to X and Y. But at the end of the day, Pokemon has had the excuse in that no matter what the quality of the game is, it will sell a billion copies. So they don't put the effort that they should in. It's the reason why, to this day, Pokemon Violet and Scarlet run at like 20 frames a
But
second at best.
atrociously is what you mean. They run atrociously.
They run like
Like they
shit.
can't have,
They
yeah,
can't
they
match
can't
standard.
run with more. Like there is literally a cap to how many polygons or how many actual models can be on screen before it just eats its own ass. And
The
you can physically see it where it's like, okay, one spawns in, two spawns in, you're fine. And then suddenly you reach that magic number,
but
everything
we're
starts skipping
dealing with
frames.
like there's fucking like geometry pop in with the environment. Like these are problems that were solved at the end of the PS2 era. You're telling me that like the Switch is not the most magical piece of hardware in the world, but it's stronger than a PS2, man. Like you're
Yeah.
telling me that you can't figure out this thing that has become like just the basic understanding of what things uh should play at, and like you're subpar. You are so subpar, and you
Yeah.
have all of the money in the world. I do not understand how you can go this long without
Yeah. Without,
meeting industry standard.
yeah.
Because there are single person indie teams that are releasing games that are, let's say, just for the sake of it, Pokemon ripoffs, that are just
Yeah.
running better, made by a single person. You're telling me that the studio that is connected to the company that has the most successful, highest, like, income merchandise products across any medium, you're telling me that
Hmm.
that company can't put the extra effort in to make a game fucking run at 60 frames on hardware where other software can do it?
And you wanna know what's even crazier than that? Is that there are actively fans of the Pokemon community that have made their own mods and run way better than even Pokemon games themselves. And it baffles me too when I see people actively put in the work for even making like the older game mods, like as we mentioned, the red mod, the emerald mod. I forgot what it.
Are you
People
talking
have
about
actively gone back
Pokemon
and
Uranium,
you
which was technically made within RPG Maker, but it's using all the
yeah.
assets with
No,
its
no,
own
no.
unique
There's
art
oh
from
no,
Emerald
it's
onward?
it's called it's called Emerald Rogue. So it plays like a
Okay,
roguelike.
okay.
But essentially the thing is the fans themselves have actively gone back and made all the sprites for even the Pokemon that weren't in that generation. And I'm like, and you mean to tell me the Pokemon Company couldn't have done that ever? Or even with some of these 3D ones where people were modding Sword and Shield and all that. I was like, how is it that the fans are able to make these run better? Like, you guys have no fucking excuse. Because if people are figuring this out on their own, what is your guys' excuse when you have a damn near nigh infinite goddamn budget to
Well,
make these
see,
run
that's the
all together?
problem is that Game Freak doesn't actually get any of the budget that the Pokemon Company has as its income, even though like it should because the games are what bring that money in. Because
Yeah,
nobody's going to care about Vanillish if it
yeah,
wasn't a meme Pokemon in the game that it came out in.
yeah. And I mean, I know sometimes too. Like I've heard that where it's like the games are one of like the last thing the Pokemon Company actually care for because they make the majority of their money. A, the trading card game, and B, selling plushies.
Well, why the
The
fuck
games
would you
are
care about whether or not Scarlet or Violet runs above 30 frames baseline if you can sell a life-size plushie of Gardevoir to psychos for $500? Or
exactly.
most recently, the Evolutions have all gotten life-size plushies, which
Yeah.
let's not
It's
go
like
into the copy pasta
let,
for Vaporeon.
let's sell a $60 game, or we can sell this fucking plushie that someone will buy, which is the equivalent of selling this game 6 7 times over.
And will only ever
It's
make
like
enough to, just immediately sell out and disappoint everyone involved with it.
yeah, and it just sucks because it's like obviously we know the Pokemon Company is well aware that people are gonna buy the game regardless of how. That's the sad truth, though,
Yeah.
is that it's like, yeah, they know their fan base is gonna want. People just want a new
Well,
Pokemon,
they know that
and that's
their
the thing that kind
install
of sucks.
base is like a percentage of the world population, regardless of how much effort they put into it. But the majority of their original fan base, the people that grew up with the franchise, are
Hmm.
starting to get to the point where it's like, I only have so many hours that I'm not forced to work 2 jobs to afford rent.
Yeah,
And like I spent now the standard is shifting to $80 minimum for a Nintendo game. You're telling me I
which
spent
is
eighty
even
dollars
worse.
on this thing that runs at 16 frames a second and can only load in 5 models before it drops even further,
Yeah, and that's if all the models loading correctly,
which they
because sometimes
won't
the models load in and they are
because you're dealing with
not
like
like.
Atelier Maruru degrees of like PS2 trees
And
everywhere.
like, can I tell you, like for instance, with Pokemon ZA, I absolutely like forgot that this was a thing that's coming out this year, mind you. And I'm just
I
like,
don't know if this
I
is coming out this year. I'm gonna be real.
yeah,
I
like
think that the
I
current
I
state
had
of things is really anything coming out on the Switch 2 is going to be up in the
that's
air.
true. It's like I had no sense to be like, oh yeah, I want to get this game. I played Scarlet and Violet and I beat that game through, and then I was just like, I don't want to play these games anymore because these games don't feel right to play. Like they just
Yeah,
suck.
and the post game is
Like
just
out,
kind of garbage.
and then you have to pay whatever for DLC
Cough, cough,
to get
eighty
the rest of the
dollars
game.
for the season pass,
And it's just like, what are we doing here,
or was it
Pokemon? It's like I don't
59.99
have
for the
that.
season pass? I think each of them released for
I
40
think
or some shit like that.
yeah, something like
Um,
that. But it's just like, why am I gonna cough out more money on these games that still
but first
to
party
this
Pokemon
day
games are just
don't run
straight up
well?
the reason that like, and they're the exemplar of the at least on the industry standard because people are going to look to what is like technically the most profitable franchise as like the idea of like, oh well, look how little they have to do to make $1 billion. Of course we're going to go a
Yeah,
completely different dynamic because like
it's like
it's not going
Pokemon.
to work for
Give
us.
me a new Pokemon Conquest. How about that?
Dude, Pokemon Conquest is,
Or re-release Pokemon Conquest.
if
God
anyone
damn it!
has in the chat has not seen Pokemon Conquest is a tile based Nobunaga's Ambition, but with
Tactics
Pokemon.
game.
It's a
Yeah,
tactics game, and it's a tactics game that has like 30 plus additional storylines after you beat the original like main story. Literally every single face character in that game gets their own like secondary playthrough scenario. It is the most insane amount of content in a Pokemon game, in a Pokemon related game that like I've ever fucking seen. It's
yeah,
nuts.
absolutely.
Pokemon
Like the
Conquest is the
resource
shit. Emulate
management,
that shit. It's amazing.
like the resource management in that game. The fact that you get to conquer other like territories, and then you have to set back Pokemon or set back like leaders and all that
Also, no, I
on
don't know why I'm
on
playing
your
the Spanish or
on your
Italian version of this
character.
trailer.
I'm pretty sure that's Italian.
Yeah, it's
Um,
Italian. I see the
and
flag.
then the fact is that you can set your defenses in case someone else attacks your territory. Just like there was so much to that game that I was like, why aren't we doing this, Pokemon? Oh,
Because
because they didn't make that
they
game.
didn't make enough physical copies for it to be profitable.
It's the Pokemon curse. Every actual good Pokemon game, Pokemon Company didn't actually
Well,
make.
yeah, it's not made by Game Freak. Like, look at
Yeah,
the best-selling or like the fan favorites that they're bringing in the GameCube emulator with XD Gale of Darkness and
yeah.
Coliseum.
And Coliseum, yeah, absolutely. Even the Pokemon Stadium games weren't there. And Pokemon Stadiums are so revered, like some of the best games because people loved enjoying them, like playing them in terms of the battle, the mini games, and like how you can do your own little gym journey. And they're like, but then I play the actual Pokemon games, and you're just, why do these feel so lackluster? Like there's minimal, even some of the animation. It's just like, did you even try?
Okay, we can literally spend like days ragging on Pokemon, or we can we
Yeah,
can continue onward.
yeah.
Because
We can press forward.
there was
We
a
just need to get
good
that little.
there's a good game you wanted to talk about that takes that classic vibe and brings it back in a good
Oh,
way.
exactly. Like this was one of the first games I had dreamed ever, which was Super Mario RPG Remaster. Can I tell you, when I first saw this game get announced, I only thought it was a port. And I was okay with that. I was like, hell yeah, I will play the. Because for those
I
that
mean,
don't
I
know,
wasn't
this was
okay
the.
paying $60 for a port, and I'm still questionably
Well,
okay
that's the
with
thing.
paying $60 for a
I
remake.
didn't know. Well, obviously, they didn't announce the price at first. I just saw the game being announced, and I was like, "Are we getting a port of this?" I was like, "Hell yeah!"
This is my
Because for those
third
that,
favorite Mario game, guys.
yeah, because I was gonna say for those that don't know, all the Paper Mario games stem from this game. This was the original game where SquareSoft, I should say, and Nintendo essentially said, "Hey, take a Mario game and make it Final Fantasy," but with a little added caveat of the jump or the timed mechanics. Because this is one of those games where it was first introduced, where you can negate certain damage or certain attacks if you timed it correctly, or
I
you
forget,
could
were
do
there
more
like,
damage.
yeah, there's attacks where it's like there's certain interactives that you can do to make the attack more effective, right? Or was that
Yeah,
just Thousand Year
well,
Door onward?
no. All of them have it.
Okay.
So in this game, like for instance, Mario uses two weapons, either a hammer or a shell. So with the shell, if you go to attack with the shell, he pretty much like winds up, and you can time it so where he kicks it extra hard essentially, and he does more damage. Or with the hammer, as he's swinging, if you time it, he does more swings. So that mechanic was already built into the game from the get go, and it's the same thing with everyone else. Like Gino does his Gino beam, obvious, and honestly, Gino again, one of the greatest characters ever. Never been seen again after this game, except for a trophy in Super Smash Brothers.
Well,
You get Mallow.
he was a Mii costume
Oh
in
yeah, he
Super
was a Mii
Smash
costume.
Brothers in the final update.
But yeah, again, this was one of those games. Again, seeing the remaster, it was one of those where I was like, it gave me exactly what the original was with the new fresh coat of paint, the new tweaks to the quality of life, which made some of the inputs a lot cleaner and it felt better. Like you felt that you weren't missing time because the original game was kind of notorious with timing that you're just like, holy fuck, like I don't understand. Like I thought I hit this. And no, like you completely miss it. Here, there's indicators at first. It tells you like, oh, this is the timing. So it naturally lets you learn the timing little by little. Then at some point, those indicators disappear, or to the point where I didn't even realize that they had disappeared. I was just already on top of it. Like, oh, I understood the timing. I understood the pace to it. And then this game also adds to you see that bar or that circle bar on the bottom left, they added what they call these tri attack, which are essentially our super um team up moves,
Didn't
which
this
weren't in the
exist in the
original game.
original? I could have swore there
They
was
weren't
something.
they weren't in the original.
Hmm.
But this game is essentially to me what I wouldn't say a perfect remasters, but it's a damn near Like it hits all the marks of what I would expect from a remaster, where they're not touching any of the original story. They're not changing too much of it. They're just updating everything. They're giving it this new breath of life where it's like, oh man, like this was the experience I remember back then, and it's still letting new audiences play this classic title in a new way, where it's just like, oh, this game is actually, and of course, everyone's like, if you've ever played a Paper Mario game, this is where it stems from. This is where it all started. And again, from what I remember, they did say there was supposed to be a sequel to this, but things kind of, fell off with a Square and Nintendo. That never happened. But eventually, we did get the Paper Mario games, which again, those games are some of the best Mario games around too. Excluding Origami King, but yeah, this game for me was one of those, like, it hit home because it felt exactly, again, going back to how I felt with Sea of Stars, like when I first played it on the Nintendo. I was just like, holy shit, I love this experience so much. The jokes were there, they all hit. Everything about the game just gave me that nostalgia, but not just for nostalgia's like sake. It gave me that same where I wanted to keep playing it because I was like, oh, this feels amazing. Even though I already knew the story and I knew what was going on, just having that fresh quality of life gameplay, and even just relearning certain things where they added in certain like little quests that you couldn't do in and then of course just learning, as I mentioned, traveling around, seeing all the characters,
So you
learning
played the
about what's going
remake.
on.
I have one question.
Yes yes
Is the Final Fantasy secret boss still in there?
correct.
Okay, good. It's worth playing.
He's still in, it's still in the game. That's one thing I'm glad they didn't get rid of. Is that there is, of course, because it's SquareSoft and they're at the height of their RPGs on the Super Nintendo. There's a secret boss in the game that is literally just a nod to Final
It's
Fantasy.
just a Final Fantasy endgame design. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
For that time
And
frame in a Mario game.
yeah. Oh yeah.
The only other thing I have to say
that
about
was amazing.
the Mario RPG franchise is, I mean, RPG original like has it set the tone. Thousand Year Door was the last time that they let an exterior studio do writing for a mainline Mario title. And
Yes.
it is
That is
amazing
true.
and crazy, and there's shit in there that like you would not expect and probably shouldn't be in a Mario game, but it added to the overall quality of its narrative. Um,
Mhm.
the systems used here were also used in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is my
Yeah.
favorite Mario RPG.
Oh, no, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about the Superstar Saga. I've never actually played the Superstar Saga game.
It's a good one. You should play it.
I wanted to play the new one that came out, Brothership. I had
I
seen
don't know, man.
plenty
I
of
feel
gameplay
like if
about
I
that.
type Brothership into a stream title, I'm gonna get banned in 3 different platforms.
If you type in Mario Brothers or Brothership, it'll pop up. Obviously, I'm just saying, like,
Your stream
seeing the
starts linking
gameplay
to a
in
Rule
that.
34 page. It's a problem.
Oh god, oh god. That's what I also love too. This mechanic, where if you timed your hits correctly, the other enemies would get hit, and I was just like, oh my god, like this game really did push some boundaries for turn-based RPGs. And they even have a little it's not as prevalent as it is in like Paper Mario and Thousand Year Door, but there's a slight little like mechanic that for medals. But in this case, you're not equipping multiple medals. It's like you have your weapon, you have your defensive item, like your armor, and there's an accessory that you can add, but you can only equip one accessory. But each accessory almost is like what the metal system is. Is like, oh yeah, this can actually boost Mario's hammer attacks, or this makes this character this much faster. There were certain items that I was like, oh, you gotta love how you can mix and match that accessory with the different characters across the board. And also, too, what I love about this game, which is actually pretty funny, like we were discussing, um, the swapping of the teams. It's like this is one of the first times you actually see Mario and Bowser work together, and they have a sick team up attack. Or Bowser with Peach, and then you got Gino with Bowser. I love the whole aspect of you can play this game differently every time you play through, because sometimes there are times I know I never play Mallow, and Mallow technically is your white one of your your white mages.
I keep
Other
forgetting
times I'm like,
Mallow exists.
yeah.
Because
Other
why
times
would
I'm
you
like,
ever
do I
swap
just
out Gino?
exactly? Because it's like, well, why would I want him? Like, I can steamroll this entire game with just Gino.
I mean, yeah.
Or other times it's like, let me just do a like Bowser run, or let me just focus on this team. Like, it's so sick being able having that type of creativity for your teams,
Okay, so
because
I
it
see where
does
we are
change
time
the
frame
dynamic.
wise, and I agree that the Mario RPG remake was solid.
Mm,
But I feel like the expansion upon that is we can't just keep remaking the same game. We have to evolve past a particular point,
yes,
and the thing that I feel
that is
like
absolutely true.
really kind of embodies that more than anything that like kind of revolutionized what we expect for RPGs as a whole, much less turn-based RPGs, is Baldur's
The
Gate 3.
Bowser's,
It is impossible
yeah,
to not talk about Baldur's Gate 3 when you're talking about RPGs in general, but this game exists in a weird hybridization of turn-based and a redefining of what. So the term CRPG refers to basically what the old Bioware style was, where you're like your isometric uh, tactical, occasionally tactical, but your isometric RPGs where you're controlling a party. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are great examples of this, but you can go into completely different genres and subgenres with like Shadowrun technically falls within this. CRPGs have been dead for a while unless you consider all of the other things that didn't get the same limelight. Pillars of Eternity was amazing, and that was an ATB style of CRPG where you had active turn time frames with pause
mm,
that were an option. Well, I mean, they were added in as an option after the fact. I think that's something that's going to be part of the final update for Pillars, or was part of the final update for Pillars 2. I never finished playing Pillars
mm.
1 because it was like I'm trying to keep track of one thing and I'm losing track of another.
Divinity and Divinity 2 also would fall in.
Yeah, Divinity is a big one, but Divinity became part of the standard Larian Studios kind of thing where there is the main game and then there is everything that you do to subvert the game. There's a lot of that in Baldur's Gate 3 as well, but Baldur's Gate 3
Mm,
is technically, because it uses D&D 5th edition's system as the baseline for its combat and storytelling and setting, it is technically a turn-based RPG. There are people who will argue about that. There are people who would say that CRPGs not only deserve the respect of having their own definitive designation, but that they go beyond what a standard turn-based RPG can do. But at the
yeah.
end of the day, I think it's really just drawing lines in the sand when we're all in the same box, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this game brought back a franchise that we thought was dead for good. If you told me before the launch trailer of this game that Larian Studios that made Divinity as an answer to the fact that there was no major Baldur's Gate or game similar to Baldur's Gate for years, that they got the rights to make the sequel to the official D&D CRPG franchise, I would not have believed you. But
Yeah.
they did, and they knocked this shit out of the fucking park.
I mean, Game of the Year, obviously.
Well, yeah, fucking swept every award through every award ceremony it was
I
nominated
mean,
for anything in.
pretty much.
It is peak and exchanging, what we expect of the tropes of of the franchise of the genre, and evolving past the limitations that we set for what we expect a CRPG or a turn-based RPG to be. There's a version of this game. I'm not saying like there's different purchasable versions. There is a build in this game that you can completely subvert turn-based combat 100%. Uh, there like the stealth mechanics in this game are super unique. You can dialogue the fuck out of an entire act's worth of boss fights until the final boss of that act. There's so
Oh yeah.
much here,
Yes.
and it does so much to show that we are not in this like the genre is not as stagnant as people are trying to make it seem. You know, the
Mm.
justification for why you should buy your fucking turn-based hero shooter or your garbage battle royale game, and why you should keep throwing money at that is because who's gonna make Baldur's Gate 3 until Larian comes around and makes Baldur's Gate 3, and now every single person is shaking in their boots because they're like, we cannot compete with this. This standard cannot be set because it's not practical to the current market. And it's not. But ultimately, it was made ethically. It was the most ethical example of an early access release where the game came out and it was piecemealed out, and there were updates and adjustments made and things added over the course of years, and it became, when it hit 1.0, like an amazing full release. Like again, it's a Larian Studios game, so each act is like a game in and of itself.
Mm.
uh, but there's just so much here that just goes against all of these, I like all of the ideas that are being pushed about what RPGs can be and what they have been, and what the industry standard is supposed to be.
Yeah. And mind you, everyone, the majority of the games we've talked about today have all come out within the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So again, going back to like the fact that there was this death of turn-based RPGs, is
So
it's a bunch
yeah,
of just horse
we're
hockey. I
going
mean, like,
around back to, to circle back to the thing that inspired us to talk about this. Um, Fucking turn-based RPGs are not dead. They have never died. They've always been here. It's just that the focus and the audience has not been as prevalent as it has been. But we have these completely unignorable successes with Clair
yep,
Obscur, with Baldur's Gate, with honestly with Metaphor, but people are always going to have some degree of hesitancy when it comes
yeah,
to JRPGs because the internalized xenophobia in the American games industry is insane.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
if the traction sticks and Clair Obscur does get nominated for Game of the Year, that's now 3 years in a row. A turn-based RPG or an RPG in general has been nominated for Game of the Year.
yeah,
So it's like the fact of the matter is that people are just getting this. Oh yeah, there's a revival to, or
I
they're
feel
they're
like
coming back.
it would be even better because this is an indie game. This is a game made by a
Yeah,
small team in a small
absolutely.
period of time, and it's like it has artistic merit and narrative focus merit, and it is everything that the industry does not want because they want to
Yes.
sell you forever games. They want to sell you games as a service. They want to sell you
Yes.
subscriptions and all of this bullshit when at the end of the day, like, we're losing out on narrative. You can have all of those things in, in a
A
different
full
kind of
game.
in a different kind of context than turn-based RPGs, but again, turn-based RPGs serve as the best functioning way to platform a story. And
Yeah.
fucking, I need to pay for YouTube Premium. I swear to God.
No, and yeah, it's and two, like, the majority of these games are always complete games when they release. There's hardly ever any story. Oh yeah, here's this expansion if you want to get the real ending or the full aspect of the game. Like, no, these games from start to finish are the game. That's what you're getting. You're getting the full experience. It's not like I'm gonna play a game and then later on down the line it's like, Oh, here's the first DLC expansion. Oh, here's the next DLC expansion, and it's just like, why?
Well, I mean,
Like,
this is
why?
something that
I
we
mean,
can talk about in greater detail later, but like functionally, games being completed on day one is such a rarity now.
yes.
Like you have games like Baldur's Gate where they released in early access because the game could not have functionally existed as it released in 1.0 if it did
Hmm.
not get the support that it got over the course of its early access lifespan. But like you have games that are launching and they're on disc, and then you go to put the disc into your disc drive, assuming that you're an old person and you like physical media like me. Because
Yes.
God forbid you don't pay for the digitized content that can get updated and like updated to the point where it doesn't exist anymore, with you not having any control over that.
Worst.
But yeah, like the games that like they are on disc, and this is what used to be the expectation of. This is how we want to present the product. This is how we want to present, the work, and then it's a broken fucking mess, and you need a 47 gigabyte download on as a day one DLC patch because at the end of the day we're still pushing this nonsense workplace dynamic where people are just being ground into dust to get something out in a competitive time frame. Because God
Absolutely.
forbid you miss quarter three.
Yeah. Um, seems what we're a little somewhat pressed for time, so I'll get through my next pretty quickly. Omori. I discovered this game during the lockdown. And this is the game I recommend you because I thoroughly enjoy. The story is just absolutely amazing how it goes between this light and dark of the character going through like this depression and then going through this quote unquote happy time, or it's almost like forced happy time. But the story itself, you just have to experience. I don't want to spoil anything for you. I at some point would love to see you play this, whether it's on stream or off stream on your own time. I want you to experience this game. But the gameplay to it, I love the core gameplay to it. How you can go out, discover, you explore the world. I love this aspect of you can see their feelings. So you see how like it'll say, oh, they're neutral. Some of them are angry. Some of them are sad. That's essentially their status effects, and that affects how they attack. And also, there's also this kind of like hybrid mechanic of like in Undertale, you could talk to the enemies. Well, here you can do that too, but also you can talk to um your other party members, which also boosts their morale depending on what character talks to the other character. Sometimes Hero can talk to Omori. Or, Kel, who's another character, can talk to Hero. Yada yada yada. Like, there's this dynamic where you can see there's like somewhat of a combo going on there, which you can see in their attacks. And there's also like this limit break type attack too, where it's essentially just their supers that they can do. It was fantastic discovering this. It was a nice breath of fresh air during a time where I was just like, I don't know what kind of game I want in terms of turn-based RPGs, where I kind of felt like I didn't know, like I felt like I didn't find anything that was that engaging. This game popped into my radar out of nowhere one day, just browsing around on Steam, and absolutely just captured me. And this again, I couldn't recommend this anymore. Like I mentioned, I would love to have you.
I do need to. It was on the to do list forever, but I really do need to go out of my way to play Amori.
Yeah,
But
especially towards the end, like the reveal at the end of what happens,
yeah, I
like
mean, I can see from the
what like
gameplay like where it's pulling its inspiration and the unique aspects of its art style. It like, and
yes,
I've been told by 100 different fucking people to play the game. But,
yes,
just
Cat does great work.
it's a good time. And Dean
Yes.
came and transitions into the other point that I wanted to bring up, where like ultimately we think about like what's under the spotlight, but there are
Mhm.
games that are like hyper indie that maintain the turn-based RPG format for the sake of carrying out their story. Some of the biggest ones that like I've really enjoyed and I had to like actively push to people, who like would have otherwise enjoyed it, but just didn't give it the time of day because it got really low press coverage. Were
Yeah,
the
you
Voice
you
of
definitely
Cards
convinced me on
games.
this one.
So
You
Voice
definitely
of
convinced me on
Cards
this one.
is like a super minimalist turn-based RPG that uses like the
Mhm.
standard expectations of what like your Final Fantasy-esque stuff would be with your standard party. It is standard turn-based combat. You are in like a archetypical fantasy setting, except this is a Yoko Taro game, so you're dealing with like hyper expressive like tragedy, but like the game is super minimalist for like what it is. You are essentially playing a card game on on tabletop, but it is revealing a story that otherwise would take a huge degree of budget to bring to life in a
Yes.
modern Final Fantasy fashion. But you have really, really, really strong writing, and you have like dynamic themes that are like if you played any Yoko Taro game, you will understand where this goes.
Yes.
Um,
And for those that aren't aware, Yoko Taro is the man who's in charge or created Near Automata and
Drakengard as well.
Drakengard game.
Yeah.
Um,
And Final
yes.
Fantasy XIV's best expansion. But alongside the indie scene is the hyper indie scene in the games that exist using the standard of RPG Maker.
Yes.
Games like Fear and Hunger, games like To the Moon, games like, and this is more than just turn-based RPGs, but there's a whole subgenre of RPG Maker style horror games. You have Mad
Yep.
Father and Corpse Party and like so much more. There's so many like crazy narratives that can exist within this space because of the established expectations of the format.
Hmm.
Fear and Hunger in particular is like a hyper grimdark. Essentially, like, hey, we made Berserk the RPG Maker game, except we didn't get the licensing, and we actually have a pretty crazy story to begin with. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But other games, like the RPG Maker horror scene is insane. Uh, and there's like super emotional narratives that are brought in with that too. To the Witch's House, To the Moon, Mad Father. These are fucking amazing experiences. Horror like The Crooked Man. You've got both Fear and Hunger games, which are like super unique to each other, but kind of relies a lot on
Yeah.
one's sub narrative. So if you are able to complete Fear and Hunger, you'll get a lot more out of Fear and Hunger 2, but you can play Fear and Hunger 2 without any clue what's happening.
I think one of the more crazier aspects for Fear and Hunger is you can actively like lose partners, like main party
Yeah,
members, or recruit other party members.
and then
Like,
within your party members, you can lose different, like, you can get permanent injuries to your party
yes,
members
this is
that
true. They can get
completely
main.
debilitate them throughout the rest of the game. Um, yeah, it's real. It's an experience, and if I can figure my way around the best version of the censorship mod, I might stream it at some point. But
Yeah.
goddamn, that game is heavy.
And what's pretty cool is, as much as we've talked about some of the bigger turn-based RPGs, these indie RPGs don't take as long to play. So it's like if you're looking to kind of break into the genre or anything, those would be perfect examples to get into because they don't take
If you figure it out, you can
standard.
play through all of Fear and
Yeah,
Hunger 1 in an hour and a half, or less if you
it's true.
use exploits.
I have seen that speed run where someone did it in like
Like,
40 minutes, and I was
yeah,
like,
40
what
minutes
the
without
heck?
using exploits. The other version of that is like, oh hey, if you find these 3 debug spots, you can just beat the game in like 3.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean,
Um,
I feel like that's kind of the bulk of what I have to say about turn-based RPGs. I mean,
yeah.
there are games that like celebrate uh upholding the tradition of turn-based while also kind of evolving the visual aspects of it. Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler are both really great
Yes,
versions of
absolutely.
this idea, where you're making like this beautiful art piece of the components of what once would have been just a game that Square Enix would have put out in quarter two.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the
I think,
idea that turn-based RPGs were ever dead is
yeah,
dumb.
quote unquote dead. Yeah.
I'm
As
glad
you
that
see,
more
we
people are coming back to the genre, but
oh, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. For like we mentioned, like personally, like these games for us have existed this entire time. It's just again, it's not always everyone's bread and butter to go to, but there was never any death to them. Honestly, I can even say even up until a good mid Xbox 360 era, they were still going strong. Like one of my favorite turn-based RPGs is still locked on the 360, Lost Odyssey,
Yep.
which gives me a slight feeling of Expedition 33 because of that quick time event aspect in the attacks of Lost Odyssey. When I first saw that in Expedition 33, that's exactly where my dude. That's just like Lost Odyssey, where it's like you have to perfectly time the A button press or the Y button press for these attacks to keep the combo going. Um, so it always just baffled me to hear this like, oh, there's this revival that turn-based games are back. They're now like prevalent as ever. It's like they never went anywhere. What do you mean they're back? They were always around. Like I mentioned earlier, the games we showed off today have all been in the past 5 years,
Past 5 years.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Which sounds like a
and
lot.
this
Like
is
that
just
that
a
used to
handful.
be a console generation, but at the same time,
Yeah,
I feel like the post-pandemic blur within the industry,
and
where things that were supposed to release beforehand had extra time
yes,
to be polished before came out at just a later time frame at the
yeah,
to the
and it's like,
extent of the studio, at the expense of the
yeah, and
studio.
mind you, this is just a smidge of what's released in terms of turn-based RPG.
Oh yeah, dude,
Just
there's
recently,
hundreds of
just
games. If
yeah,
you want to go
just
into like strategy RPGs and tactical RPGs, like if you want to make the argument that XCOM and all of the games that match that style are turn-based RPGs, then you can like there's
you can make
entire
that argument.
subgenres,
Yeah,
like hundreds of games in the last 10 years that fit that particular bill. Turn-based games may have fallen out of popularity. They may have fallen out of the Western public spotlight, but they've never been gone.
yeah, absolutely. And I hope we've been able to enlighten on you guys that stuck around this whole time and listen to maybe try some of these games for yourselves, or at least go out and support people who do play these type of games. Because again, it never hurts to just watch them. Like you can just watch the playthroughs of them
Yeah,
if you don't personally want to, play them or you, whatever can't afford to because again, not everyone's on the same boat. Whatever it may be.
that's the
The thing
beauty
is,
of the platform we're currently on.
correct.
Twitch.television gives us all the opportunity to gain better insight and, communicate with people who are more passionate about something that we don't have as much knowledge on,
Of
that,
course.
you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah.
Especially because my dumbass is probably going to play Fire Emblem Three Houses on here at some point, and that's going to take like
You
80
gotta go.
hours.
No. You gotta go back and play Path of Radiance.
I need to finish Path
You
of
should,
Radiance because
and
I
then play
did go.
Radiant Down.
Yeah, no, I do need to play Radiant Dawn. We're we're
Like,
we're going past the point.
yeah.
um,
No, yeah. But yeah, we've said our pieces.
yeah, here
That's really
let me stop that.
that's yeah. Oh yeah, the trailer's still playing in the back. Um, but yeah, I think that was well enough for us. Oh, what the heck is going on here? Hello, there we go.
Yep.
No, it's my Discord.
Yeah, but I'd say that's a good end of episode 1. Do you want
Yeah.
to completely subvert our entire point and play some stupid bullshit like Fortnite?
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Um,
I gotta grind those levels, man. I forgot to cancel that pass, so I have to
mm,
care for 1 more month.
of course, of course. Yeah, let's fire it up. I'm down to throw down on some rounds.
Whole cop.